let's go ahead and start dissecting this image, Rebellion. Well, the original start really came from the Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner announcement a few years ago when he made the thing that now you're going to call me Caitlyn, I'm a lady. And I started thinking, what does the Bible say about transgender movement? It's a popular movement today in the United States, but what does it have to say? And really, the passage in Romans 9, verse 20 talks about the idea that why should the thing formed say to him that formed it, why have you made me thus? Why have you made me this way? So the ultimate idea is we are rejecting our Creator. We're putting our fist in God's face and saying, I don't want you in my life, or totally denying him. It's either total denial of God, that he even has any existence in our life, or that why did he make the mistake and treat me this way when I'm not that way? So it's ultimate rebellion. That's where the image comes from. And so as a nation, if we're going to be shaking our fist at God saying, this is the way we are, we need to have this as commendable, as brave, as courageous, as many will say in the United States, our nation could be under judgment very soon as we start to say this is what's right and God say no, it's not. So here's the piece. It's actually quite complex. There's 3 sets of layers. I actually created different folders because there was so many layers inside each one that it was easier just to put it out into sections. So you see the background, created the environment, created the sand around me was actually fairly complex. And then the area of me, the rebellion of me, the banana, the heels, myself, and putting that all together. So let's start looking, as our practice is dissecting the entire background. We have all the way to the tree image. So the tree actually blurred it out quite a bit, and I actually used different layers behind it. There's clouds in here. This one is just the clouds. I shot them in the farm. Actually, this one was shot from a moving vehicle. Don't worry, I wasn't driving. It was my wife. I was shooting on the passenger side, so nobody was hurt. And darkening the clouds that were shot. So I needed these menacing clouds, and so I shot many pictures. All the stuff is my own work to make it work. Put together the idea here of the background of the Capitol. This is actually the Madison Capitol because I didn't have access to the United States Capitol easily. And then I had to make it fit because right now the contrast, it doesn't look right. The lighting doesn't seem right. So I added a clipping mask. Go to here, create a levels curves adjustment. I created a curves adjustment here. Darkened it down quite a bit in the shadows and in the highlights. Added on, so it's adding some dimensionality to the lighting. Darkened the entire thing after that on another layer. Created another clipping mask. Moving it together. Darkening it down. Create a darker version. The tree touch-up. Had a kind of touch-ups on the edges of the trees. Lots of different layers. I probably could have done this a little bit more put together, but there's lots of layers, lots of touch-out, lots of cloning. Brought in another layer of trees. So just some other separate trees. Some pine forest. Brightening them, darkening them, where God's eyes might be viewing. Darken the edges. We call that a vignette in Photoshop. So lots of different layers here put together between what is actually seen and put together in the entire picture. So that's just one particular layer. That's just the background, building the background element to it. Then we got the sand element. What are we going to do with the sand? Well, the sand comes in a couple different ways. We have so many different elements here. One is just sand. A picture of sand. I shot the sand in the studio. I laid out a shower curtain, laid it over with lots and lots of sand, and then shot the picture. I actually put my tracks in there so you can see tracks that I've actually looked like I might have been walking in. Put some edits to it, darkened it out a little bit to make it fit. It's too bright. Darkened it down. Add some shadow where the trees would actually have some shadow. If God's light was coming from here as he's looking down from heaven, creating what could be some shadow from the pine trees. So what I did for that one is I actually just took a copy of this tree and I flipped it and then darkened it. So it's not actually a brush. I just flipped that copy of the trees and then I blurred it a little bit. So there's some blurry edges to it. Darken the edges, kind of make it blend in a little bit more on the edges there. And that's the sand. Fairly simple layer when it's all put together. The rebel layer, which is a fun layer to put together. Is lots and lots of different layers. First of all, you see the option here of just me. There's me. This is how I shot it. I was shooting this on a pretty limited budget, as most of us probably would shoot something on a limited budget. And so finding a size like 13, 14 women's high heels was hard to find anyway. I didn't even bother. And it probably would have been fairly expensive to buy a new pair of shoes that way for just one photo shoot that I had no intention of ever wearing. Since I'm a 11 guy's shoe, what I did is I did the entire shot in my high heel, or on my tiptoes. So I'm raising my heels naturally. So a little awkward in the terms of posing, but working that scene, knowing that I would Photoshop my wife's heels on her size 8, much, much smaller, the size woman 8. So posing that, knowing that to begin with when I shot it, and making it work. And then bringing the different layers between the shadow of me, adding shadow where the light would be coming from the right, moving into the left. I had to create that shadow, created what's called the soft shadow, kind of the outer shadow, just generic shadow. An inner shadow, the darker, more defined line where you can see the edges of the leg, the body, the skirt, and then kind of really, really dark layers, because there's usually 3 layers of shadow, kind of a soft edged version, an inner shadow, and a middle shadow, and dark shadow. So creating those different layers and putting it all together between the process. So all those layers come into effect to give you that style, piece by piece, work by work, of bringing it all together. As you can see, it's quite complex in terms of the Photoshop technique here. And then I added a little bit of shoe touch-up, because some of the shoes had some extra shine. I reduced that shine by just putting a blank layer and then cloning it out, taking the clone tool. I like the clone stamp tool, zooming in quite a bit. And then just using what's called the Alt key to select a portion of the shoe, and then masking it over, blending that layer, taking out some of that glare. I didn't remove all the glare, but just removing some of that glare from the layer. Doing some glare reduction on the shoe. So that was part of the process there. The banana added kind of some wry humor. I shot it similar proximity to the shoes and the sand, on the same sand that I shot in the studio. But the banana adds that humor, that idea that it's a slippery slope. Once you start saying this is right and that's not right, or we can do this and we can do this, where else do you go? This kind of rebellion creates other problems, and we're seeing that with our country. We have a lot of people, well, you can't tell me what to do, you can't tell me not to be a man, how do you judge me, how do you have hate speech? It's just what the Bible says, and people have different beliefs, whether it's religious beliefs or they're maybe antagonistic or atheistic beliefs. It's a slippery slope when you start saying this can't and this shall, and it gets pretty messy. So see, also adding light rays, sometimes called God rays. All it is in this technique here is I went and created a new layer. Let me turn this one off for a second. Create a new layer, create levels, brighten it out quite a bit to the part that I want. And then I'll go here with a mask, and of course make it black. Use a round brush would help. With a brush, I just darken out what I don't want, where I don't want the light to appear. Something like this. All you do then is you take a small brush, quite small brush, here maybe a few pixels, 10, 15 pixels. You hold Shift, you hold Shift up here, and draw us a straight line from point to point. Hold Shift, click straight, draw straight, click, hold Shift, and it draws a straight line from point to point. So you do this lots and lots of times, dozens and dozens of times. You create this streaking layer to it, something like this. Lots of layers, lots of shift clicking, which right at this point looks pretty bad. But then I come up to the filter and do a Gaussian blur, something like this. And this is where it helps to become a little more believable. It kind of soften those rays a little bit. And it helps to soften the overall effect. Maybe 3 layers, something like that. It's starting to get close. And you do this over and over, and you go forwards. And sometimes I'll take one that's a white, and I'll actually bring back parts of the layers. Parts that are bringing back. Parts that are bringing back. It's lots and lots of clicks and bring them together. So light rays working from this. This concept of having to go behind me, I could actually put this behind the layer of me. So I've actually dragged this behind the image of me to work maybe better so it actually doesn't appear on me. So now it's behind me. That's an option as well. So lots of complexities to it. But here it is, just masking it out, getting the blending together. This one is just a darkening layer to kind of darken the edges, kind of bring the whole thing together as everything should seem unified together. That's the point behind all this. And creating a better image, something like that. So it's lots of layers, lots of effects. As the final image, though, I did forget to show you how I changed the image of the color on me. Because originally, remember, I was shot in green color. Actually, I had to, because I had a reflector on the left of me. That was a mistake that I did. The light is very dramatic. There shouldn't be a lot of light bouncing from the left side because it's all dark here on the left side. So what I did by accident is put the reflector. I had to darken back the back side. So reduce the highlights in that area to darken down quite a bit, just the highlights in that area, darken it out, and then change the color. So what for the color saturation, all I did is I went and created a clipping mask, created a new adjustment layer, a hue saturation, put it as a clipping mask. And what I did, instead of going to all the master colors, this is what people get as beginning Photoshop people a mistake. They go here and they take the pink color and they start playing with the master sliders and everything changes. If I change here, the entire thing changes. That's not what I want. What I want to do, which is the professional way to do it, is actually select the color range that I want. So I went to my greens, into my, actually there's more, I think, cyans in here. There was a cyanish colored dress. And then I started playing with the saturation of that particular color. So all the greenish cyan colors, instead of being green, I pushed them over to being pink. You can push them to some degree. Give them a more feminine color. Of course, make it a little more feminine. I thought about having like a rainbow flag, stuff like that to help, but I wanted it to be maybe not quite so obvious in terms of the message. But playing with the color, all with a hue saturation. It's not affecting anything else because of the clipping mask, all bringing the piece to a finality. Thanks for watching this video on Rebellion, Dust to Life. I hope you enjoy it. I look forward to seeing you in the future. Please click the subscribe button to find more videos as I produce them on how to do Photoshop in the real world.